can get started. Well, cheers, friend. Episode
Cheers.
1 of our Married podcast. What are you drinking? The mystery drink.
I'm just pulling a Lou Grant and just drinking some straight scotch.
I miss scotch. Oh gosh, I'm 6 months into no drinking this year. I'm drinking a non-alcoholic gin and tonic, which, as my boyfriend said, so it's just tonic.
So you're choosing to drink pine tree flavored things without even getting, like, I don't like gin, but at least that one gets you a little buzz.
I don't like gin either. I hate gin. But I'm going to be honest. I don't know if it can come up here. The packaging sold me. I was like,
Yeah, it is
very
pretty.
This is a very fancy pants little shirt, not shirtless. Gosh, no, it says spiritless. If there was gin in it, I might be shirtless. I'm kidding. Anyhow, we should introduce ourselves to those watching. You go first, my dear.
I'm Kacie Hackett. I am right outside of Washington, D.C. I am an event producer and stand-up comedian and trivia host.
You are.
And I think those are all of my jobs at the moment.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I do have a good collection of jobs too. Although during COVID, it's lessened some. But I'm Kelly Zemnickis. I'm based in Toronto, Canada. This is right now the only way Kacie and I can hang out because I can't get across the border until I'm vaccinated. And what do? Gosh, I'm a freelance writer and a comic and a documentary filmmaker. And I have this weird job called transcribing. I'm a transcriber for movies and TV shows. And I am a recovering brunch hostess. Oh, I do not miss the service industry. That's been one bright spot of being at home during COVID times. Because Toronto, we don't have the restaurants open like you do in the States. I miss some customers, but I don't miss doing that job. That job was hard. And I spent a lot of time, maybe about 15 years, working as a production coordinator on TV shows. So I was in a TV studio, much like your background right now. Ta-da! So for those who may not know what our Zoom backgrounds are all about, these are two very pivotal sets from our beloved Mary Tyler Moore show. You are at what were they? The worst station in Minneapolis?
Lowest rated. Yeah, I think lowest rated.
And then I am, of course, in Mary's first apartment. Phyllis is right there, just about to let people in. We'll get done before Phyllis has to bring in the people. But we are here in these two awesome sets. And man, this is one of my most favorite TV shows. As a gal in her 40s, I feel like a lot of my friends might associate more with maybe Sex and the City as a show they gravitated to, with like a good collection of like storytelling and friendships. But for me, this was the first one, was the Mary Tyler Moore show, because we're gonna get into this, but I adore Mary. I adore everything about this show. And I've told you before, I have no idea who first introduced me to this show. How did you find it?
So growing up, I grew up in the 60s and 70s, which was a rude awakening when I went to kindergarten in 1995 and found out that TV shows were in color, and my lunchbox was definitely not the same as everybody else's. But what I mean by that is my parents were really, all the music was 60s and 70s, all the TV we watched was 60s and 70s. So I just grew up watching everything on TV Land, not even Nick at Night. That was you were getting the modern commercials on Nick at Night. That was too modern for my weird 70s Amish bubble that I grew up in. So just a lot of TV Land. And this is one of the shows that I really identified with even as a small child.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, growing up for me, um, I remember like TV was like another sibling for me. I think because both my parents were working in advertising. I just would sit down in front of the TV for dinner, like always ate dinner in front of the television,
Mhm.
rarely sat at a dinner table. But for shows for us, it was a lot of like Solid Gold and American Bandstand and like music shows and game shows and soap operas. And my parents played a lot of disco in the house and a lot of that was my upbringing. I almost feel like I introduced my parents to this show. Like, just
And they were like, oh yeah.
oh my gosh. I hope it's going to come up on the Zoom background, but we're going to start at the beginning with season 1 of there's the box right there. Ta-da! In this funky little outfit. I've got the whole collection on DVD. I still own a VHS machine, so if it was on VHS, I would watch that too.
But I would say if you are looking to dive into the show, it is all on Hulu, all 7 seasons now. So you do not need to go out and buy a DVD or VHS player if you are just riveted by what we're talking about and want to go and catch up on the show. Thank you, Hulu, to send me.
I was going to say, as soon as you're vaccinated, you can come over to my house and watch it on my DVD.
It's as soon as you're vaccinated. I'm vaccinated. I'm fine.
No, that's another podcast altogether. Is what the
Yeah.
That's another podcast altogether. All right. So the Mary Tyler Moore Show. How long was this show on? I've got a little note here.
Oh yeah.
It was on for 7 seasons. Debuted in 1970. 8 years before I came into this world. Yeah, just saying. 8 years before. And I think it's one of the most like award-winning comedy shows ever. And when you watch it, it's not too hard to figure out why they cleaned up as much as they did, because the writing is killer, the casting was amazing. I want to get into 2 quick things, just for anyone watching who knows the show, or for you specifically, Kacie. But so Gavin MacLeod was initially brought in to audition for Lou Grant.
I saw your note there, which he's just so sweet, but like I'm sure he could be a good actor. But like I don't want to discount him being like a surly, moderate alcoholic, but I just cannot see that.
Absolutely not. Ed Asner just has that character down perfectly. And it blew my mind to find out that when he first auditioned for the show, he bombed hard. And he came back to try again, and that's when they cast him. They gave him a second shot.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he totally fucked it up. I don't know why. I don't know why specifically, but I was listening to the commentary with the DVD, and he said, "Yeah, that first audition, he just sank it." And like we know as comics, that feeling of when you bomb hard and you just like, I don't want to go back to the club the next day. I want to give it a bit of a breath, but he went right back in.
And I mean, and then it clearly worked out because he had his own spinoff. Like that,
Exactly.
he's still. I thought he's on some podcast now. He was touring, doing a one-man show like a year ago. He's in his 90s and still kicking it.
And then the other thing, when Ted Knight auditioned, he plays Ted Baxter. He auditioned 4 times. Sank it the first time, sank it the second time, didn't do well the third time. And the note that I read was he came in the same like crappy jacket, didn't really sell it, came back a 4th time with a brand new blazer. And apparently the producers were so touched that he went out and bought a new blazer. He got the part.
That feels like Ted Baxter, though. Ted Baxter also would not be doing a good audition. And Ted Baxter also would blame the blazer.
Which I think could be like a good word to live by, something to stitch into a pillow. Blame the blazer.
Yeah.
No, blame the blazer. Oh my gosh.
And Kelly, since we're talking about the first episode and kind of the genesis of this and kind of the theme of marry and love and relationships overall, I think kind of talking about the show as it gets started. So I was reading Mary Tyler Moore herself was divorced at the time. And her and the other showrunner they were kind of pitching it with, he was divorced as well. So they pitched it to CBS and they're like, yes, but she can't be divorced. And so that kind of got them, because they're like so passionate about this. There's like, this is a thing that's happening, a thing that people are talking about.
Right.
So they needed to come up with a backstory for why this single woman in her 30s would not be married. And the exact quote, this kills me. The exact quote, this is the year 1970, maybe 69 at the year that they're pitching it, or earlier. Okay, if they won't do divorce, what can we do that would explain an attractive 30-year-old woman without a relationship? Like, what a mind-boggling problem. There could never be a reason. Like, can you picture the writers in the writers' room just being like, well, what if she was in a coma for the better part of her 20s and she woke up and that's why she's single? It's like, no, a woman can just be single in her 30s. It's a thing that can happen.
Oh my gosh, that concept of her being in a coma is such like a soap opera concept for what I grew up with in the 80s. For sure. But yeah, that's one of the things. Like, this show was pitched, as you say, they probably had that conversation in 1969. I'm still having that conversation today, and it's 2021. You know, it of course TV has changed that we would still see that, but like that theme has still continually run through, which really boggles my mind. But yeah, I love that there was this moment in time where they were just at a loss.
Yeah, how can this be a realistic prospect? I don't understand.
How could any other woman relate to this?
Yeah.
She is clearly the
But one thing I do love about this show is, starting in 69, or, that conversation probably happened in 69.
Yeah.
Show came out in 1970.
Yeah.
And there's so much conservativeness around it that you can't even have a divorced woman. But this show touches on sex so much.
So much. And sexism.
Yes.
And you get all of that in the first episode, no matter if it's Phyllis's young daughter wondering about Mary's, boyfriend, or if it's the boss hitting on her. It is all thrown at you in this like wonderful baseball.
Or the ex-boyfriend showing up being like, I still don't want to marry you, but like, hey, I'm in town. Like,
oh my gosh. So the episode, it's what Phyllis, I think, who brings up the conversation initially with Rhoda, and like explains that, this, relationship kind of fell apart. And what really kind of boggled my mind was like, Mary is clearly trying to reestablish herself from the start. She's trying to look for a job, look for a place. And yet this, yeah, but what's your relationship status always seems to like the card that trumps anything. Like she, comes out to tell Phyllis she found a job, and it's like, yeah, but the boyfriend,
Yeah. And everyone, like, she got this amazing job, a job that like she's really excited for. Yeah. And yeah, because there's news of the boyfriend coming in town, everyone's like, Yeah, well, I mean, you're not gonna stay at the job. Like, you're just gonna like fly back with the boyfriend.
Yeah, because there's this one line that Phyllis gives her of, well, it's your apartment now until you're married.
Yeah.
Like you're going to have this fun little job on your own but until you get married and you be a grown up. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's pretty wild that was a tough sell. And apparently the script itself, when CBS executives were reading it, it was getting like goose eggs. Like they weren't seeing the humor in it.
Mm.
Um, and it's this amazing, coming of age story, this great comedy about a single gal trying to figure her way out in the world. And it really pisses me off that there were people reading this going, yeah, no one's gonna want this. This isn't wholesome. This is not. Ugh.
Well, that's because and the show touches upon this too when they talk about executives in the television industry.
Yeah.
It, it's not women reading it at the top, right? Like, so all these men are not identifying, not identifying with this hot woman being single and turning down men like themselves
Right.
in the industry, like they're not really liking that show to be put out there. So yeah, I was like, episode, it's not even just the pilot, episode after episode they were just hating.
100%.
Yeah.
And in that first episode, Love Is All Around, there's a line that you mentioned about the relationship with the doctor blew up in Mary's face when it's pretty obvious Mary decided to end it.
Yes.
Even that, you couldn't just, I chose to end this relationship. Like that was not acceptable. It was poor Mary. It wasn't, oh, Mary made a decision that was working in her best interest. Holy crow, people. I just, oh my gosh. Because that would have been a time when, that was, I guess, a very, a risky stance to take on TV as a woman, of claiming your space, owning your job, not needing a guy to support you to get you through to that next phase of your life. And again, I go back to shit that I'm still dealing with in this, day and age. Like, I guess about 15 years ago now, I bought my first home. And I did it by myself. And I remember even at that bank meeting, the lawyer that I had was like, and you're not married? Like, how are you doing this by yourself? Like, that's
I remember, so I got a call at the very beginning of the pandemic. So like this time last year, maybe a little earlier. And it was from my insurance company.
yeah.
And they were like, hey, we just noticed your records haven't been updated in several years. So we just want to confirm that you're still single. That's literally why they called. The pandemic, I'd probably been living home and like really cut off from society for about like 2 months. And I just go, yeah, and I'm feeling it now more than ever. Definitely still single. And she got so awkward.
To that point, when I sold my house, the lawyer at the time that I sold, he said, and you're still single? And then he stopped and he looked at me and went, I didn't mean it like that. Like, but I remember going into that unit and getting the tour of the place, and the woman who did it asked me if I was married, and I said no, and she grabbed my hand, and much with like the camaraderie that Phyllis has with Mary, which is this kind of like mothering, mothering instinct she has towards her, even though they've been friends for a long time. But I remember the woman who took me through my place just like held my hand and closely said, "Don't worry, dear. He'll come. He'll come one day." I was like, what the hell? Why is this still so taboo?
I remember, and this gets into the whole other thing with like, that's a question you get a lot, and then whether or not you want to have kids and like that whole thing. So
Yeah.
when I was buying my place, my realtor was heavily trying to talk me out of it. Frankly, because it was the cheapest one I was looking at, and I think she wanted a higher commission. But she was like, the school districts are not great in that area. It's a 1-bedroom apartment. Like, where are the kids gonna go? I was like, yeah, that's not really in my plan. And she's like, well, for resale. And I was like, the person buying it is still buying a 1-bedroom apartment. I think they're gonna be pretty much in the same boat as me. It does not matter, but thanks for trying. Thanks for trying.
Oh my gosh. I just had part of my physical done the other day, and the gal doing my heart check, the EKG or ECG, I don't know which one it is. But afterwards she's like, "So, how are your kids?" I was like, I don't have kids." And she went, "Oh, well, are you going to?" It's like,
Oh my God.
it's like, what I can, it's okay. Guys, it's okay that it's okay that we both don't have kids. We're not, it's like, oh, it's still a thing. Yeah. Oh, but it's definitely the marriage thing. The fact that she's single and flying solo. Like, there's one quote that I picked up watching episode 1 again was, "There's no simple answers to why someone isn't married."
Yeah.
That was this beautiful exchange with her and Lou Grant when she's going to apply for this job, and it is like conversations that you should never have an employer ask you, like,
It's pretty much a checklist of everything you're not allowed to ask. Just boom, 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 boom.
"What's your religion? Are you married?" And it's wonderfully juxtaposed with like her typing skills. Like that conversation, I just found was so beautifully written. Between like 65 words a minute. "Are you Presbyterian?" This amazing dance. We've commented watching through the series, and we'll get into this as we continue through the podcast, but the initial, I guess, the viewership of the show really was pulling for Lou and Mary to couple up. They were
Really?
yeah, which I kind of see. But as the series goes on, it's like, no.
Now, to me, he is a father figure to her. The ages of his daughters, frankly, I would love to have like a string board of when, because when he mentions the ages of his daughters, and because at the beginning they're all married and there's grandchildren.
Yes.
But then later in the season, someone's getting married. Later in that, someone has a boyfriend. I like want to do like a detective of like tracing Lou's children's ages and relationships, because it doesn't match up.
We should definitely do that.
But Mary also dates the same guy 4 times under 3 different names. So I don't think continuity was like the goal. It's not like when they were writing Lost and they literally had a grid of like where every gun was at any time for like a continuity of things. They were just like, that guy was on the lot. Let's just give him a new name and pretend Mary didn't date him 2 episodes ago. They didn't even wait a whole new season for her to date him again. It's literally in season 1.
I guess it was the 70s and folks were indulging in things. I am not sure. I'm all about like fun facts on shows, and the writers apparently pitched Ted Knight's character and Mary to hook up. the initial plan was for Ted Baxter and Mary to become a twosome, but when Ted Knight auditioned, he skewed the character older and they said, fuck it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was, he would, because the Ted Baxter character, like we have them on shows today, like even actual shows we watch and like sitcoms, but he's that like, you know, dim-witted, really handsome, not much is going on up here. Like I think there's one line of like where Murray and Lou go over words that Ted said incorrectly the night before, and one of them was Chicago. So I could kind of see, like, had he been cast as a younger character, maybe a bit of you know, like a you know, a dummy that Mary was dating, but yeah, that didn't end up panning out for the better.
Right. And they definitely, she's his date for something at some point, I think. They definitely pair up.
Don't they go on a date in one episode?
I think she's like his date to like a dinner, like a formal dinner or something.
Something like that.
They may have gone on a date.
They possibly did. Well, what a wonderful, you know, just completely vapid newsman.
Yes.
So well done. And so the episode, this sort of the big moment in that first episode is the news that this old boyfriend is coming back. But when I look at the notes of the DVD, and this episode aired, just fun fact, September 19th, 1970, when this episode first aired. It says that she's rebounding from a broken engagement. Had he proposed and I missed that entirely?
I've read that several times too. A broken engagement. I actually have it in front of me in a different trivia, but yeah, because I don't know if they ever say that precisely in the show.
Mm-hmm.
I do feel like engagements were looser back then. Like if you gave someone your pin in your fraternity, you were engaged. So like I think just by the fact that they were in a 2-year relationship and I think living together, I don't know if they ever say that outright, but it's definitely a little implied that they were living together. At least I always got that sense.
I got that sense too, and she is quite open of how she was expecting it to go to another level.
Right.
It's not that this character was like anti-marriage and didn't want to get married. She was with this guy for 2 years, kept like expecting him to say it. He clearly was phoning it in, which is so evident when he comes to visit her and he's brought flowers that were for someone else. Like he didn't even think to like take the card out or do that extra step, you know.
Right.
Like he I think for her character, that 2 months that I guess they'd been apart gave her the perspective to see that this guy wasn't good enough for her. And I mean, I've definitely been in that scenario, like, you know, where you're with a guy who's just not the right one until you take a step back and you realize like what you did. But I certainly, reading this broken engagement thing, I wonder if that goes along with the whole vibe that you mentioned of, you know, people having trouble believing she could be doing this just to be happier. That they had to like, you know, in pitching it in like the TV guide, oh, if you see she's got a broken engagement, you know, maybe that's an extra reason to tune in. I'm not sure. The hand holding really floors me that they had to do for people to watch this.
Yeah. Or I think it was just to make her seem more pure.
True.
A single woman at 30 is, you know, what kind of history does she have? Someone who was in a longer relationship, heading on that path that, you know, is conventional, you know, I think that's why, it's to make her seem not like this is not some party girl you're watching or whatever.
For sure. And I mean, even though it was, you know, long before our time, she was very well known as the wife on the Dick Van Dyke Show. I don't know.
It's interesting you say that, because another, I don't know if this source is as reliable as the one I was reading before about CBS not being about divorced women, but this is on IMDb, and it's saying they didn't want her to be a divorced woman because they associated her as Laura Petrie from the Dick Van Dyke Show. So if she was divorced, that means they're putting this image of Rob and Laura from the Dick Van Dyke Show, who were the personification of JFK and Jackie.
Right.
And were meant to, who at this time were JFK was deceased. But like they were this all-American image. So that was part of their hesitation, according to this one fact here.
Yeah, that makes sense. I definitely have not followed the Dick Van Dyke Show as I followed the Mary Tyler Moore Show. And funny thing, the title of the show, it's a pretty simple title, The Mary Tyler Moore Show. The initial title was just Mary Tyler Moore. And a last-minute decision was to add the and show.
They're not going to know. They might just think they're looking at a photo of her for 30 minutes. We better clarify that this is a show.
Like, that's a strange thing to know. Oh my goodness me. The relationship between her and, is it Bob or Bill, the first boyfriend?
Oh,
I feel like it's a.
I don't know. He was so insignificant. I didn't even bother to write his name down.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. I feel like in today's world, that guy would be the dude who's like, no, we're not dating, we're just hanging out.
Definitely.
Like, can't even say I love you. Like, just struggles with it so much. I once had a guy say I love you and then take it back.
How soon after?
A day. Yeah, I'm
Interesting.
Sorry. You can't do that.
It's almost better if they take it back right away. Like they were just like, oh, you know, like when you're on the phone and you accidentally say I love you to your boss, and then you know, because that's just how you hang up the phone. But no, to be like, oh, I had some time to think about this. I slept on it.
His exact words were, you know that thing I said last night? I didn't mean it.
That's, oh.
That would be this guy.
Yeah.
Mary's seeing. And she has this beautiful way of dumping him in saying that I'm really terrible, I'm really lousy at saying goodbye. And then going on to another conversation, he clues in that she's just broken up with him. And then the cast off of this guy is his saying to Mary, take care of yourself, and her reply saying, I just did. Which I think just, for me, rewatching it, just really establishes her as a gal who knows she's got to take care of herself and that she can take care of herself. And it's such a wonderfully strong ending to that first relationship that we see her in, and first episode of the show. Like you've kind of got a good idea that she's going to be just fine.
And that's why I really like the title of the episode, Love is All Around, because it's about a breakup. So to tell you that love is all around in a breakup really clues in on, this is not a show about a relationship or really any future relationships. Love relationships. This is a show about friendships and the people that are around you.
Character, she's what, in her 30s? I think.
She's exactly 30, because in that back and forth with Lou Grant, I think she says she's 30.
That's right. Another thing you should not ask.
Yeah.
But
though, to be fair, resumes do kind of like, that's one that like people figure out. Like, they, you know what year they graduated college, you know, you get an idea.
That's true. Unless you're that 2-year-old genius who just got into Mensa. I just read about. But yeah, like that time in your life, I know for me, going through my 30s was such a time of figuring myself out and establishing myself and finding my voice. And you know, I think the series comes to illustrate that beautifully, because the 30s, you figure out so much about who you are, and she does that as the show goes on, which is, I think it's why it still holds up today when you rewatch it. You know, you don't feel like you're watching a show from 1970. You know,
you really don't, and that's the thing. What's great about this show, you know, there's so many shows from the 90s, specifically in my head, mainly because the 80s were just the 70s in my house. So I don't know what happened in the 80s. But there's so many things where it's like, well, that could never happen today. But you can't say that about this show. Like, all of these things could happen. It might happen a little differently. But everything still would happen pretty much exactly the same.
Like, there's such a great friendship from everyone, just, you know, from the word go. Apparently with the test audience, the Rhoda stuff in that first episode didn't play very well.
You know, I can see that in the first episode because they don't set her up to be a friend. They set her up to be a nemesis.
Yeah.
And then the second episode, they just were like, yeah, okay, now, you know, she heard the thing through the vent, so now you guys are best friends. So that was a very interesting transition. But I could see, if I was just in the audience, just being pulled on that one thing, it'd be like, why is this chick always in this apartment? You know, she you know, she was breaking in.
Yeah.
The first episode's definitely not her strongest episode.
Definitely not. And apparently that is why they gave Phyllis's daughter, they gave her the line of her liking Aunt Rhoda to warm up the audience. That was added because Rhoda was just flatlining. I find all these little tidbits so interesting, like how they like you know, massage this area, put this in. But yeah, Rhoda was just breaking in, saying she owned the place. Yeah,
I can. It's an interesting choice they made for her in that first episode.
Definitely.
And it definitely does set up like they're different, and Mary, you know, in Rhoda's perspective, and this is something that comes up throughout the show of, you know, Mary always gets what she wants, like everything is handed to her. Right. And Rhoda's always kind of passed up a little bit. Mm-hmm. So it definitely sets that up. But I don't think it did the character any favorite. Like, they didn't give her best like comedy lines or anything in there either, and like she is just hilarious through.
Oh, she's just fantastic.
The show.
Yeah, no, she's just really, really wonderful. Yeah, she's just that tough New Yorker, you know, who's not really thinking too much about anyone else in that first episode, but I was still charmed by it. I don't know if it's just because I love New York so much. I was like, I've met her before. I definitely know that person. Now, one character that, correct me if I'm wrong, but you never see him, is Phyllis's husband, Lars. I don't think he ever appears in the show. And my question to you is, what do you think he looks like? Do you have any idea what Lars looks like?
I feel like you might see him in one episode.
Oh, really?
I can't remember. if he might have been at a party because he leaves with Sue Ann Nivens.
I'm gonna look that up on my phone. I'm
It
genuinely
definitely would.
curious.
I don't know if they say he leaves with him or they show it. They maybe just say it. But they've done. Phyllis talks about Lars's family being in town, and they're all Swedish. So
Right.
I just picture a very tall Swedish man.
According
Blonde.
to Google, he's never seen.
He's never seen.
No.
Well, that's why they had to kill him off for the spinoff.
So many themes though in the show are still so relatable. Like we talked about love and dating, relationship with your parents, bigotry, like writing, the importance of friendships, female friendships in general, which all in all, I think makes this show something you could watch tonight, like without any hesitation. Like I'm such a fan of this show.
Me too. And it's just one of those, like, it'll make you laugh, it'll make you cry, but like you can end any day with it in a good way. I think only the later seasons will make you cry.
Yes.
Like when it's ending.
I know. Oh my goodness. Well, there's definitely more to touch on as we go on, and we can get into specific episodes and dive into them more. But I think we've given people a pretty good picture of why we love this show and why it's still so dang relatable, however many years later. So, how many years later has it been? What, 51?
Oh my gosh. So can I tell you, I was asking trivia the other day, and I was asking about a woman, Sue Bird, who is the only WNBA player to win a conference or win a championship in 3 decades. Oh, wow. And then I was looking at the years. It's like 2004, 2011, 2020. And I was like, that's not 3 decades. Like that's all in the 2000s. And then I figured out that was 3 decades, and I had a mini life crisis just then and there. I was like you can't have 3 decades in the 2000s. We are still in the 2000s. So I don't want to talk about how long anything has been.
Well, yeah, from my Facebook post is how I remind you what day of the week it is.
Yeah. I'm just still living in September 1970. An actual time I've never been alive in, but have also always been there my entire life.
Yeah, I can only claim to having been alive in September 1978. So and I don't remember it much. Although I can tell you, my first word whenever I uttered it was ABBA, bringing it back to the disco.
That's amazing.
That was my first word. And then eventually we'll do a hat toss when we can be together in person.
Oh yeah, we gotta do a hat toss. And I think we should have a different set every time we meet.
Definitely. And I will not do this in front of my bedroom window, which the sun has now set, and I'm blending more into the background.
Oh yeah, you're further north, so.
Yeah, a little bit. If you watch the show, at the end of the credits, there is a lady's face that is sandwiched in between the words of the executive producers. I believe that was in her obituary, that she was the lady at the end of the Mary Tyler Moore show.
Oh.
I believe that got put in her obituary. Yeah, because she's just looking right at camera. It's this beautiful, beautiful moment, slice of life. But alrighty, I think that's good.
Yeah,
we covered
a lot. We'll talk about some more themes in another episode soon.
We definitely will. And if anyone's old enough, the song for this show was written by one of the members of Buddy Hollett's Cricket. Let me try that again. All right. Before we go, the theme song to this show, Love Is All Around, was composed by one of the members of Buddy Holly's Crickets. There you go.
Maybe that's where Weezer got it. Oh, you look just like Buddy Holly. Ooh, and I'm Mary Tyler Moore. I never got the connection as to, I was like, they never dated. Why are we comparing?
Either. That must be why.
I think they just took two classic people, but we'll say this is why.
We'll say it's why. I just had a light bulb moment. I'm like, oh my God. Wow. My mind's just blown. It's either that or it's my non-alcoholic gin and tonic.
Yeah, it's hitting you. It's hitting you.
All right. We will say goodnight to everyone.
Okay. Good night.
Good night, Kacie.